How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance to win your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below and I'll try to answer each and every question. So you may hear some echoey. Unfortunately, I can't control that in this environment. These houses are made out of a cement cinder block, so they echo a ton a lot more than we do back home. Additionally, there's loud music going on in the background. They go until 3:30 in the morning. It's the town festival, so I can't control that. So if you happen to hear some music, that's what it is. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week. It is this person has a 14 CRV and they're hearing and feeling vibrations and clunkiness while making sharp turns. So this was very common in the like '03 and up CRVs. And here we are with a 14, 15 CRV having this issue. And essentially is if you don't change your fluid on an appropriate time, for the rear differential, it's going to get burnished, and at that point, you're going to get some clunkiness while the clutches are working and whatnot. So what you need to do at this point is do a 2 times service or a flush, a drain and fill, not necessarily a flush. You're going to go ahead and drain and fill it, do some figure eights, do some sharp turns, go ahead and drain it again and do some sharp turns again. And it should be okay. In some rare cases where it's extremely bad, it may not resolve the issue completely, but after maybe 5,000–6,000 miles, do it again. And typically we see great results out of it. There was a service bulletin for this way back when for those CRVs, I think beginning of like '06 or '07 or something like that. But it happens to a ton of vehicles if that rear differential fluid is neglected. So if you're feeling something like that and you happen to have one of these vehicles that does have all-wheel drive system from Honda, even on the Acura side, then that would be my first go-to. If you know you haven't done the differential fluid, go ahead and change it. Make sure you use the right fluid, dual pump system fluid, and make sure you use the right stuff. It's the clear stuff, not the VTM old school fluid. It's not that stuff. So all the new stuff uses dual pump fluid. So make sure you use that. And in order to avoid this, just do the first service at 7,500 miles. And then I do the next service at 30. And then from there on, every 30,000 miles, unless if you're off-roading or something like that. So hopefully that answers the question for you. Okay, so the next question is, do you need to maintain your vehicle at a dealer in order to qualify for service bulletins, warranties, warranty extensions, recalls, etc.? And the simple answer is no. If your dealer is telling you otherwise, then go see a different dealer. That they cannot deny a warranty claim, a recall, or anything of that nature because you don't service your vehicle there. Now, it's always good practice if you do either your own maintenance or you have your own private mechanic, which either is fine, that you save all your receipts, not only for this, but in the event that something happens, you want to have proof that you have been maintaining your vehicle, and it's not neglect or anything like that. But regardless, the only time something will not get done is if it's the wrong part installed in a car, and it's like a whole process. We have to document everything. We have to take pictures. We have to contact our rep. A lot of people involved. And then at that point, they decide what they want to do. But typically speaking, they cannot deny anything unless if, again, the wrong part is installed, or if it was a warranty claim and you happen to, replace a strut, a lowering spring, and the strut went bad. At that point, they could have an argument. They would still have to prove that the lowering spring damaged the strut. So it gets complicated, but 99 out of 100 times, you will not be denied a claim just because you don't maintain your vehicle at a dealer. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So the next question is, when should you be looking to replace your struts? Now, OEM Honda struts and shocks are great. Occasionally, we will see a blown one here and there, either leaking oil and or making noise. So very rare to happen, but we do see them from time to time. But considering the amount of vehicles that we service, which is close to 1,000 a month, we may see 2 or 3 actually being faulty and defective. So what time is good to replace? Well, that really depends. If your tires are having some funky wear patterns, then question your suspension, your struts, but anything suspension related. If they're leaking, obviously it's time to replace. Now, if it's leaking at just out of warranty, let's say at 40,000 miles, you can probably go ahead and just do the one that's leaking. If you have 150,000 miles, then it'd probably be a good idea to replace at least a set, if not all 4. Now, a good time to start looking at them is right around 100,000 miles. Just start paying attention, make sure that you're not too bouncy and it goes up and down and stabilizes. If it goes like this and driving like an old Cadillac, chances are they're not doing a job anymore. Again, tire wear, anything visually wrong with them, then go ahead and change it. But right around 100,000 miles, I want to say go ahead and do them. Don't prioritize that over other maintenance like time belts, spark plugs, and fluids. Definitely don't prioritize it over that. But start taking a close look, pay attention, and things of that nature. If anything looks off, then go ahead and do them if you want. If not, then it is what it is. It's your call. But right around 100K, I think is a good time to start looking at everything closely. So hopefully that's the question for you. The next question is, what are some signs of a failing thermostat? So typically it's going to be one of the three following things. One, it's going to stick open and you're just not going to reach full operating temperature and have good heat in the winter months. Two, it's going to stay stuck closed. And at that point, you're probably going to overheat and you're going to find out real quick that is starting to fail and maybe even cause additional issues if you can continue to ignore that failing stuck thermostat. And from times to times, we'll see aftermarket thermostats actually throw a P0128 code, which just the ECU picks up that it's operating at the wrong temperatures, either too early or too late. And it's not liking the difference between the ECT sensor 1 and ECT sensor 2, which is the coolant temperature sensors, typically located one on the engine and the second one right at the bottom of the radiator. So one of those three scenarios will probably happen. Although I will say Honda thermostats are really, 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 really reliable. The only time I see them being an issue is when the vehicle overheated for something else and caused one of those plastic housings to melt and it got misshaped and whatnot, thermostat's out of place. And at that point, again, it won't get to operating temperature because it's stuck open, causing that, code or whatnot and the vehicle not to get to operating temperature. But again, we do not see Honda thermostats failing. Not saying that it can't happen, but my 18 years with Honda, I don't think I've seen one yet. OEM Honda fail either stuck or open, unless if something else caused that to happen. So hopefully that answers the question for you. And last but not least, question of the week. And once again, if you want a chance of one of your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below. And again, I'll be making a follow-up video for next week, probably here or somewhere else in Europe still. And then the following week, I should be back home already. So anyways, what TLX Type S modifications are worth it and which ones are not? And I can make a full detailed video on this subject if you guys need me to do, then I will do so. And I plan on doing that after a milestone. But anyways, back to the topic. So what mods are a must? So I'm going to start off with just simple stuff. So lowering springs, I think, are a must just because it gets the car at a nice visual stance with either some wheels or some spacers, just for, keeping the adaptive struts and, making it sure everything looks nice. And secondly, I'm going to go with the front mount and charge piping. The front mount is essential. The charge piping, not so much. These cars run extremely, extremely, extremely hot. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that this should have been a bigger intercooler from factory. After 2 or 3 pulls, the car, is running extremely hot. It won't overheat, but just the intake system is extremely hot. Downpipe, great bang for your buck, money. If you want a mod that's going to make it sound great and gain some nice power, downpipe is your first modification. And lastly, the Lambda tune, whatever tune you choose is going to be great. They're only going to be getting more aggressive and better. So if there's something you don't like yet, I promise you better stuff is coming out. Flex fuel, TCM tunes, stuff of that nature. So make sure you stick around for that. I will be talking about all those products once, they're fully developed and on my vehicle. So drop-in filter, great. Do not get anything outside of OEM housing for the gearbox. You're asking for trouble. Do not do an aftermarket blow-off valve. I promise you, it will not leak. You will not be losing power with the OEM blow-off valve. Exhaust, in my opinion, way too expensive. And we've seen Type R's, FL5s, FK8s, Integra Type S is making plenty of power on stop exhaust systems. So I wouldn't do those mods. And they're extremely expensive. And then the tips end up, not looking so great after a while. So OEM exhaust works and looks great, in my opinion. The only reason I would do an exhaust would be for a weight reduction. So speaking of weight reductions, lightweight wheels, a must, in my opinion. This car performs really well with weight reduction. So if you don't want to mess with the engine and transmission because you don't want to worry about warranty stuff, stick to lightweight mods. So battery, a lithium battery is a great modification. Lightweight wheels, you could lose easily 15 plus pounds per wheel. Lightweight rotors, also another nice modification there. Kind of expensive for the amount of weight you lose, but still it's a kind of a 2-for-1. You get brake performance improvement, and you also lose some weight, so some acceleration improvements as well on that end. And basically that's about it. Now I also have the P2R throttle body intake manifold. Now, while I did notice some gains, there's also some drop in temperatures in DA. So that kind of could have played a part in it. I would have loved to see a dyno on those two modifications from P2R, but I can't tell them what to do. And also, I didn't provide any additional information on that myself either. So at this point, I would hold off on those personally and just do the ones that we spoke about here. So again, I'm going to make a full video on this, guys, but just to touch on that subject because people keep asking me, what mod should I do? What mod should I not do? So just off the top of my head, that's what I would do personally from my own experience and from everything I'm seeing so far from the performance aspect of these vehicles. So with that being said, I'll catch everyone on the next one.